Alright guys, here is the breakdown for the Pro Circuit Title Championship at La Crosse, Wisconsin, Upper Mississippi River. Pool 8 is where I made my living. We had Pool 7, 8, and 9 in play. A lot of you guys, I know you've probably seen the coverage to the point where you're tired of hearing about it, but I'm going to do this breakdown and really try to go into depth, little subtle things that maybe I haven't talked about on all the media outlets that have covered the event. So, you know, it was an event that literally, with all the days off and the long stretch of event time, there were so many changes. Fish were transitioning. They were really getting on a shad diet more so during the week. There was just a lot changing. So in practice, it was about taking a brief example of everything that Pool 8 had to offer and then giving myself enough areas, possibilities, patterns to build on to see which ones were going, which ones were coming. Luckily, I looked up and I did that to perfection, you know. It was just my time. Things went right. What an amazing week. So something I'm definitely proud of and thankful for. Going to try to, you know, move forward with that momentum, and boy, hopefully there's good things to come in the future with fishing from that event. So anyway, first day of the event, Tuesday, Group A, day 1. I go to the Black River because I'd caught some fish on Saturday and my first day of practice. I got up there, saw the bait. There was lots of thread fins up there that were bunched up, roaming around. The water clarity was just looked attractive. I caught a couple of nice fish on a buzz bait and eelgrass that had about 3 inches of water over it. And I said, that's enough. I've seen enough. The Black River's not hard to navigate. I can just learn this on the fly. And I left it. Go back day 1. Took me about an hour to figure out the river had dropped. I tried to make the eelgrass stuff go with the buzz bait. There just wasn't enough water in it. I ended up finding some fish on a little shelf that dropped from like a foot to 2.5 foot. Just happened to see a fish chase a shad through a topwater out there and found a school of them, caught a decent limit. Then just jumped around. I realized the buzz bait was still working. I changed colors, went to a black and gold just because I feel like you can get bigger bites on that black and gold if you've got enough wind or enough visibility distraction like wind or clouds to get a bigger fish to eat it. So I ended up going to that later in the day and realized that those fish had pulled out to any patch of eelgrass that was separate from the main clump that ran along the bank. Any isolated patch of eelgrass was gonna have a fish on it. So that's where we were at for Tuesday. Thursday rolls around. We have a fog delay. We don't get cut loose until like 9 o'clock. The sun burns through the fog really quick. All of a sudden it's hot and still. I tried to force my pattern from Tuesday for probably an hour and a half. I finally had an epiphany. I said, look, reset, conditions are different. I pulled out a shaky head, hadn't thrown one in practice, hadn't caught a fish on it all week. I just had one tied up in the box. The conditions screamed finesse. I pulled it out in like the first or second cast. I catch one. I ended up catching my limit off of one little subtle drop out in front of where I'd been catching fish the day before on top waters. So that's how Thursday went down. Later on in the afternoon for Thursday, I made a couple of really key calls on the buzz bait, and that's when the isolated eelgrass pattern really shined. Man, it was just like clockwork. I could see a patch up ahead of me. And this is after the afternoon. We got a little wind. They would not touch it in the morning. This is like the last hour of the event, basically, for Thursday. I could see a patch of eelgrass up ahead of me. Polarized glasses, just see a dark spot out from the main mat and throw that buzz bait over it, and I was going to get a bite. I ended up catching a really key 3¼ pound fish that coiled up, got me to that 13.5 pounds, sealed the deal for making knockout round. So knockout round rolls around. Now we're on Saturday. The Black River was still good as far as numbers, but the size had went down. I realized a lot of guys from Group B were fishing in the same areas that I was fishing in Group A. Those fish were getting more pressure than I realized. At 11:30, I had a limit and had culled several times, and I had 8.5 pounds. I said, man, it's time to make an adjustment. So I went down to a place where Sunday evening, pretty late in practice, I had caught close to a 3.5, I think, or a little closer to 4 on a frog in a little backwater area. And I run down there and practice. I had my motor trimmed down. You probably heard the story. I found a closing dam that ran across the mouth of that backwater with my lower unit. With the skeg of my motor, as I was trolling over it, my motor hit it. I didn't even realize it on the depth finder when I went over it. So I knew it was there. Really wasn't significant at the time. I go down there on Saturday. I don't get the bites in the backwater. I had spooked some shad when I went in and saw a fish try to eat one on that closing dam. Threw a topwater round, had one miss it, but didn't get any more bites. So I said, well, let me let this place settle down. I go in the backwater, try the frog again. Nothing happens. On the way back out, I see a shad break the surface. I had already thrown a jerkbait in there, no bites. I pick up a walking bait and catch a little smallmouth. The next cast, I catch a big 5.2, biggest fish I caught all week, and then just a couple casts later, a 4 1/4. That was what showed me the magic spot. And there was more fish coming up, rolling on the bait. It was crazy, man. I'll go into the cadence on that topwater, but I figured out a cadence that would make them eat it and actually successfully get it. I knew there was a bunch of fish there. Come back on championship morning, I catch them on the main big spook. I catch them cycling through some other topwater baits, and then conditions get kind of similar to they did on group A, day 2. I go finesse. I can't fish a shaky head on it. I say, let's try a Nico rig. Go to the Nico rig. It was the ticket, man. I caught just several fish between 3 and 4 1/4 pounds. Ended up with 17-15. Won the belt, title championship. Awesome deal. But here's the baits. So that's a lot crammed into 4 days of fishing. It's all over the place. There was other things that played, a jerk bait, a chatter bait, of course the shaky head, several different kind of topwaters, but here's the staple, the main 4. That's the one that worked for me on day 1, some on day 2, and then caught the big ones on knockout round, the 2 at the end of the day, and then caught a couple on championship Sunday. It's just an old walking bait that I've got. They asked me the color, I don't know. It's caught a lot of fish. You can see that those teeth marks have basically made it translucent, black and gold on the back. It's a special bait to me because I've caught so many on it. I feel like it does more than any other bait like it that you buy and take out of the package. I just think I think I told somebody, I said when they made it at the factory, they put some magic in it. Just something I've really got a lot of confidence in. That was a big player. I made sure to keep really sharp hooks, and I would replace those after every day to make sure that those number 3s there were super razor sharp, good to go. Threw it on a 7.3 hammer, cranking, medium heavy, and I threw it on braid. It was 40-pound braid to a 15-pound monofilament leader with an FG knot. The leader was probably 24 to 30 inches long. That I think was important to give that low stretch braid a little bit of forgiveness, but still allow me to feel those fish on a long cast, because a lot of times they would miss it. I think it was a big ticket having that medium heavy cranking rod. Still got plenty of backbone, but it's a little stiffer than what you might throw a topwater on, and that braid, instead of straight mono, I could feel a fish at 30 yards on the end of a long cast and tell if he actually got it, and it didn't take a whole lot of oomph to drive these hooks home and actually stick them good. Anytime you got big treble hooks, I'm a believer in going on the heavier side of an action and line than on the lighter side, because those big hooks, if you set the hook right and they stick them and they're not just barely skin hooked, then you can put more heat on them than you would think. Smaller treble hooks, I'm going to go with a lighter action. They just pull a little bit easier. But those big hooks, if one gets it right, you could probably horse them in on a flipping stick and still catch them. So I'm a believer in a little bit heavier action than I think some people preach with crankbaits and stuff, with a glass, 8-foot glass rod that can bend over and the tip can touch the butt of the rod. I don't like that stuff on big treble bait hooks. The next topwater that was a big deal, following up to the spook, that was the Azuma Popper Z. This little guy walks really well. You can see all the teeth marks on that one. That was a brand new bait when I pulled it out of the rod box on, I guess it was probably the first day. Yeah, it was the first day of competition. I pulled it out, caught one on the first cast. I said, well, obviously they'll eat that. They were keying on a lot of bait. That feather, I think, made a big deal. But this bait, just, you can walk it just like a spook, just like an Azuma Z-Dog. It walks effortlessly, but you can also chug it, make it give a loud chug if you just give a little more follow through with your twitches. It's just a bait that is very versatile and a really cool size. That Blue Bahama is an awesome shad imitating color. Threw it on 15-pound big game monofilament to a 6.6 medium action rod, and that was the ticket, man. A lot of times I'd chug it, let it sit. That feather would settle. It's slowly oscillating in the water. You know, you got current, wind, and 5, 6, 7 seconds it's sitting there, and all of a sudden it gets swallowed. So that was a big deal. The buzzbait, which I talked about, these are hard to get right now. We're working at Black Bass Tackle to try to get them rolling again, but that Delta blade, it looks like we're gonna have to probably go to a silver one. What do you know, I win the title on it and all of a sudden we have trouble getting components, but we're probably gonna have to do a silver and gold combo. But that's the BRD. It's bi-rotating Delta blades, so those blades counteract. They rotate in different directions, and what that does is it gives the bait a tremendous amount of lift. You can pull this bait so slow across the surface. You can, when you give it a stop, it's almost like it sits on the surface, and then you start it back up, man, it engages really quickly. Just a good old black toad on it, and always run a treble hook in the tournament. I've learned the hard way on that. I just put a little stopper with a free swinging treble hook on the back. Man, that don't go without it. I don't care what you're fishing it in, what kind of heavy cover, make that treble hook work. So that's a 1/2 ounce model. That was a big player. See the bi-rotating blades there. So my rod reel line setup on the buzzbait was a 7.3 heavy action hammer, high speed reel, and 50-pound braid. Excellent bait. Championship day, I'm leaning on that school of fish with the top water. They quit after the first initial, what you'd call morning bite. I try a shaky head. I catch one fish on a shaky head, but I break 2 off in like 5 casts. It was just a really gnarly, rip-rappy type dam there that I was fishing, submerged dam. So I haven't thrown a Nico rig in a long time, but it made sense at the time. It's an effective bait. I just pull out a basic little finesse worm. I've got the nail weight pulled out a little bit just so that you can see it, but I was rigging it in the head, a 3/32 ounce tungsten nail weight, dropping it in there, pushing it out of sight, and hooking that bait about a little above dead center and just hooking it right through the middle. A lot of times I will rig a Nico rig like you'll see a lot of guys do, just like that. Might not be perfect, but you'll see a lot of guys rig it like that. And I chose to rig it sideways, straight through the body in this event, just because I feel like it lets that tail fold out of the way a little bit better. And once in a blue moon, I have had, when a fish eats that bait, I've had, with it rigged the other way, that tail get over the hook, and you actually set the hook and do nothing but drive your hook point back into the worm. When it's rigged straight through the center like that, I feel like it allows that tail to fold out of the way just a little better. So that's why I rigged that. The downfall to that, you're going to break it off a lot of casts. You're going to go through a lot of worms. You know, fish 20 or 30 casts without catching a fish, you might just sling it off. Go through a lot of plastics that way. But anyway, that's what I chose. That worm would get down there. I could walk it across that riprap and keep my hook elevated off the bottom, keep it from getting hung. 10-pound mainline fluorocarbon, fluorocarbon leader to a 10-pound braided mainline. I had about a 5-foot leader. That combination right there is hard to beat. It's light enough to get bites, but 10-pound fluorocarbon, if you're throwing a good line, it's gonna you know, hold up to a lot more than you think, as long as you got your drag set right. And 7-foot medium action spinning rod. and a good spinning reel, and that's the ticket, man. That's what did it. I ended up going to a green pumpkin type color. I don't even have one. I ran out of them during the event, but I ended up going to that and catching a couple of key fish after I felt like they'd seen a lot of the black, just made a little color change. So that is the breakdown. I know y'all have probably heard this story, you know, but hopefully you picked up on something that I talked about with the buzz bait or the Nico rig or the walking bait. Let me go back to the cadence real quick on the walking bait. That was real important. So I figured out if you just walk this bait, we're walking it along, they would blow up on it, but I swear they were in kill mode and they were hitting that bait with their mouth closed. A lot of times the bait would go flying out of the water, a big explosion, and they would not even come close to eating it. You keep walking it, they do it again, knock it out of the water. What I figured out, especially on those bigger fish, when I got it in a place where I really felt like a fish was looking at it or could see it, it was in their strike zone, I would speed it up. I'm talking about click, 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 and then I would almost pause it, but not, I would click it to the right, and it would glide, and just as it come to a stop, I would let it sit for about a half a second, and then click it back the other way. So it was about that cadence right there, and it would end on a pause, a very, very brief pause before I clicked it back the other way, and I would do that 3, 4, 5 twitches, clicks, whatever you want to call it. And then speed it back up for, you know, 7 or 8 feet, and then go back into that really slow glide, pause, glide, pause, and that is when the big fish would eat it. They wouldn't hit it with their mouth closed, they wouldn't blow it out of the water, they would come up and flush the toilet on it and have it sideways. That cadence was big. That's something I've done at the Tennessee River on pressured fish and grass. I tried it up there, and when I did, a 5-pounder swallowed it. So you know, that's just trying something, throwing it up against the wall, and it stuck. So that is the story on the Title Championship. Thank you so much for my viewers, all the support, all the comments I've had. Please, if you haven't watched that video, go back, watch it. Tell your friends. You know, at the end of this month, I'll be retiring from the sheriff's office, full-time fishing. Just going head first into it. YouTube, I'm hoping to grow it, put out a lot more informational stuff. I'll have more time, thankfully, and y'all's support will be a big help. Thank y'all for what you've done so far. Let's help grow this channel, and man, can't wait to see what the future holds, but we'll see y'all around the corner. Thank you.